If you got yourself a capybara off the black market and you had a social media channel, maybe it's TikTok or Instagram, where you're showing off your capybara, me as your follower, I want that capybara too.
Welcome to Nature's Guardians. I'm Micah Siegel. Each week I talk with people working to save and help animals around the world. They are nature's guardians, and you can become one too. Today I'm talking with Debby Querido from Animal Survival International. Welcome to the show, Debby.
Thanks, Micah. I'm so honored to be here. I'm very glad to be chatting to you today.
Great to be talking with you too. My first question is, can you tell me about your background and how you ended up where you are now?
Sure. So I am based in Cape Town in South Africa, and I studied English, media and writing, film, and some journalism. And I eventually became a digital writer for online, because online began to really take off when I started working many years ago. And then I somehow found myself in this organization. I was a writer and they were looking for writers. Animal Survival International needed writers. From starting off as a writer and doing all their social media, I've become one of the campaigners, which means I go out into the field. I get to know about the people working on the ground with the animals, with the wildlife, and I help to put together project solutions to help the wildlife in need. And I always feel that if you are passionate about animals and animal welfare and wildlife, you can find your way into this kind of arena, and you can find your way into a place where you can really help animals and make a difference. At Animal Survival International, we have a very large pool of donors, mostly email donors. So we send out these email appeals to our donors a couple of times a week, and we let them know what's going on with the wildlife. So for example, there might be a pangolin that has been poached from the wild. It's been badly injured, and our partners have helped to rescue the pangolin. And we will tell our donors, this pangolin is in a really bad way. It's been very badly injured, and we need your help to give it the treatment that it needs to survive. And then our donors will donate to us to be able to do that. And the money we bring in goes to that project. It will go to that pangolin to help ensure that it gets its treatment and that it can survive. So that's what I write about here. I write to our supporters, our donors, and I try and encourage them to donate to the animals so that we can help them.
What animals are you particularly interested in?
So I think it's a little bit of a cop-out to say that I love all animals, but it is true. But in my role, I'm particularly interested in trying to find ways to help animals that are vulnerable, endangered, critically endangered. And I also am very passionate about trying to educate people on social media and animals, because what's happening a lot today is that influencers procure these animals. Maybe it's a chinchilla, maybe it's a capybara, maybe it's a very pretty tortoise or turtle with a beautiful shell, and they show them off on social media. And the problem with that is that you have a species like the irradiated tortoise, for example. So irradiated tortoise has a beautiful geometric pattern on its shell, and they are critically endangered. And they are being poached from the wild in parts of Africa and then sold on this illegal black market trade, so that your influencers or people who are trying to be influencers can purchase these creatures and show them off on social media. And the biggest problem with that, of course, is that social media is highly influential. People watch. So Micah, for example, if you got yourself a capybara off the black market and you had a social media channel, maybe it's TikTok or Instagram, where you're showing off your capybara, me as your follower, I want that capybara too. So I go out and I buy one. And the trade of wildlife, most kinds of wildlife, is illegal. And it creates a massive problem because these animals are out of the natural environment. Humans should not be in ownership of a wild animal. It's a massive problem. And the other side that people often don't see is some people want a little baby chimpanzee, a little baby chimp. And they think it's super cute, and they train it, they have it in a nappy, in a diaper. And the reality behind that is that often, in order to procure a baby chimp, poachers or hunters have to go to a troop of baboons or a troop of chimps, and they have to kill all the adults, because the adults will obviously try to protect the babies. And once they've killed the rest of the troop, they steal the babies, and then they sell those on the black market. And I have a huge interest in that, because I do have, as well as a writing background, a social media background. I think social media is incredibly powerful. I think on a domestic animal side, social media is brilliant for helping to home a cat or a dog, or rehabilitate a cat or a dog, or find a foster home. And by the same token, social media can be really, really powerful for wildlife, because we can use social media to teach people that it's not okay to have wildlife as pets. Doesn't matter what wild animal it is, it needs to be in the wild. And that's why I think your podcast is so powerful, Micah, because through this podcast, you get to teach people that. And I'm waiting for the day that you go viral with your podcast and really help us to protect the wildlife of our planet.
For some reason, YouTube doesn't recommend me like videos
I'm
with
sure
people owning chimpanzees or like these types of animals you're talking about. So I wasn't super aware of that. That helps. Thank you. I am now guilty for owning a bird, but so how many people are doing this and for which animals?
it's a very difficult question to answer, and I wouldn't be able to tell you how many people are doing it. But some of the most popular animals, like I mentioned, are the irradiated tortoises, because they look so beautiful. Chimps are also very popular. Chinchillas, capybaras, those are the kinds of animals that people are procuring to show off on social media. Even animals like pangolins. People will try and get hold of any exotic animal that they can, capybara, for example, and show that off on social media for the clout. And there was actually a guy in Brazil recently, he's a social media person, influencer, he's got a capybara and the animal was confiscated. And that creates a massive problem, because the wildlife authorities of the country are saying, you're not allowed to own a capybara because it's a wild animal. But this guy's had the animal since it was a baby. So all it knows is being owned by a human. So they seized the capybara and they've put it in a cage in a government holding facility, which is obviously awful for the animal. And the animal did have a better time not being in a cage in his owner's house. So it creates a massive problem, because what do you do with these wild animals that are then hand-reared? They can't fend for themselves in the wild. You have to own that animal forever, because if you don't and it gets released into the wild, what's going to happen to it? So it's best to just leave wild animals where they are.
So how can we stop this?
The best way that we can stop it is for us to get onto social media ourselves, to have podcasts like yours, Micah, and to teach people that it's not actually okay to own a wild animal. See, a lot of people don't really know. They think it's cool, they think it's cute, and I don't think that most people go into owning a wild animal with bad intentions. They don't want to abuse it, and they treat it really kindly. I just think a lot of people don't realize that it's not fair on the animal.
So is your organization set up to help one animal at a time?
It really depends on the need. So our organization works as follows. When there is an animal or a group of animals in crisis, we will do everything we can to help. So it might be an individual pangolin or 16 or 17 infant pangolins called pango pups who have been saved from the illegal wildlife trade. And in that case, we're focusing on one animal. But for example, last year we helped in Kenya, where there was a terrible drought and wildlife was dropping dead all over the show. Giraffes, elephants, buck, all kinds of animals. And in that case, we will try and find solutions to, for example, drill boreholes to pump water to the surface for the animals. So it really depends on where the need is.
Tell me about trafficking and how you stop it.
The sad thing about wildlife trafficking is that if people knew how to stop it at the source, we could. And we do know. It's just very, very difficult, because often you'll find that there are very powerful people involved in trafficking. And that's not to say you can't stop it. It just means that you've got to start small and be relentless in your efforts to stop it. Often the poachers right at the bottom of the chain, the people actually killing the animals, are not the people making a lot of money. They might be impoverished and they might be desperate for some earnings. Often we will work in places where we're training poachers or educating poachers to change their lives and to become field guides or to become nature guards, where instead of poaching an animal, they will actually be patrolling forests where poaching takes place. The other way that we can start targeting poaching is by helping to dispel myths around certain animals. So in certain parts of the world, primarily in Asia, people think that pangolin scales and pangolin meat is very, very special. So they think that the scales can give them various medical benefits, and they eat the pangolin meat because it's a sign of wealth. It's very difficult to dispel those myths, but you have to just keep on educating people about the fact that a pangolin scale isn't going to make you stronger or more popular or richer. And what I will also add is that something like rhino horn or elephant tusk, which has been so widely poached and has really just obliterated population upon population of these animals, the only way really to stop poaching would be to devalue your rhino horn and your ivory. And that is something that governments need to look into, because as long as there is a value attached to your ivory or to your rhino horn, those animals will be slaughtered. And the fewer animals left, obviously, the more value that rhino horn or elephant tusk has. So we work often with teams on the ground. We'll work with police teams who will intercept poachers. We work with teams in Zimbabwe where there are very heavy penalties for poachers. So any poacher who's caught will go to jail for years and years. And that's another way to stop it. You impose very harsh penalties on the poachers. When you catch guys with these huge consignments of contraband, your rhino horn or elephant tusk, you fine them massive fines and you put them in jail. Only if we put all these elements together and keep educating people can we actually get to the source and try and reduce poaching and ultimately stop it altogether.
Some people are working to make these products legal. What do you think about that?
I think that it could work in certain circumstances. If everybody has an elephant tusk and it's completely legal to own it, then it's less of something to show off. So I definitely think there could be value in that. And it would be interesting to see how that would play out. Because if you look at, in some parts of the world, countries have made marijuana legal, and in some parts of America, it's legal. And a lot of people thought, when marijuana is legal, everybody's going to be smoking it. But that hasn't been the case at all. And I'm sorry, I shouldn't be talking to you about drugs, but it's an example. And here in Cape Town, marijuana was made legal a couple of years ago, and we haven't seen that every single person on the streets is using it. It's just not the case. So absolutely, I think there is benefit and value in bringing illicit activity to light and just taking the mystery out of it and removing the value that people attribute to it because it's illegal and because it's so hard to get hold of.
So which way do you think is more effective?
At this point, I would say we still need to be clamping down really hard on poachers and people who are committing these kinds of wildlife crimes. And it would be interesting to see what would happen if it was made legal. It's hard for me to answer that because I have no idea how it would go. But until that happens, we have to be penalizing people who are guilty of poaching.
Which social media do you like and how do you use them?
We use the main social media platforms. We use Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. We're starting on TikTok. I think Facebook is still very, very powerful. I think that it has some of the largest reach of all the platforms. And the people that we find on Facebook, particularly following our work, are often older and they're educated, and they're also able to share our message with their friends and their followers who are also educated and interested in animal and wildlife activities and protecting wildlife. And I also think that TikTok is extremely powerful. TikTok is reaching masses and masses of young people. And we are starting to use TikTok to educate our supporters and our followers. For example, I recently was at a bat rehabilitation center. It's a fruit bat, also known as a flying fox. And it was an orphaned flying fox that is being rehabilitated. And I was holding it to show the camera. And I made sure to say, it's actually not okay to hold a bat. I'm holding this bat because I'm with an expert who is trained to hold it. And this bat, is recovering. But you should never just go and hold a bat or any other wild animal because you think it's cute or it's cool for the camera. So whenever I post on social media, or often when I post on social media, I try to make it clear that, this is for educational purposes, but it's not okay to interfere with wildlife, and it's not okay to be trading illegal animal parts or horns or tusks, because it's just destroying these populations of wildlife.
Where do you think people got the notion that animal parts will help them in medical services?
I think that it's a long-held cultural belief in a lot of countries and a lot of cultures. there's a product called ijao, which is made from the gelatin in a donkey's skin. And there's a massive trade all around the world, the donkey skin trade, where donkeys are slaughtered for their skin. And this special gelatin is harvested from their skin. And Chinese people think that this ijao, this gelatin product, will help them look younger and more beautiful. So it's used in beauty products. It's a horrific trade, the donkey skin trade. And it's obviously completely untrue that some gelatin from a donkey skin is going to make you younger. It's absolutely not. You also look at African cultures where there are beliefs around particular animal parts. They're used in muti, like a medicine that gets cooked up. And it's just a cultural belief. And that also makes it very hard to break because it's so tightly held and tightly believed that you really need people within those communities who understand that they're just myths, and people in those communities can educate their own people. It's very hard to come in as an outsider.
What would you like to see happen in the next 10 years?
In the next 10 years, I would like to see a massive change in people's attitude towards wildlife. I would like to see the media and social media really encouraging people to see the value of our wildlife, to respect our wildlife. I would like to see the numbers of animals that are being killed greatly reduced. And I would like to see respect for our habitats. You know, it's not only poaching. There's habitat loss because people are building. People are encroaching on wild animal spaces. I want to see more nature guardians like you, Micah, in the next 10 years. That's really what I want. I want young people like you who see the value in our wildlife to be stepping up and taking charge of our world, because I think us as the older generation, we haven't done a really good job. And I have huge faith in your generation that you are going to be the guardians of this planet and of its wildlife.
How can kids become nature guardians like you?
Becoming a nature guardian starts in your heart. So in your heart, you've got to have a love for animals. Read books about wild animals and start to learn about them and how they function, how they live in their communities. And you will grow an affinity for these wild animals. And in your day-to-day life, think about not littering, not polluting. Think about the products you buy. I don't think, Micah, you're going to buy a crocodile handbag. And I hope that none of your listeners would either. Try and find ethically sourced meat. It's okay to eat meat, but there are places where you can buy your meat, or your parents can, where the animal has been treated properly. And it hasn't just been this mass farming situation where the animals are horribly abused until they are slaughtered. Ask your parents what they think about animals and how they relate to animals, and just being out in nature, understanding that animals and wild animals are so important to the nature we see outside. When you play in a park, when you are out in the mountains, insects, birds, small little rodents, all the way up to big animals are all responsible for keeping our planet so beautiful and so healthy. So if you want to get involved with wildlife, roll up your sleeves and visit a farm, visit a wildlife sanctuary. Try to avoid going to places where animals are exploited. Petting zoos and circuses, anywhere where animals are on display and being used to make money. Just avoid them, because you can go on a beautiful safari one day and you can see animals in their natural habitat. So simply by avoiding things where animals are being exploited, you're already making such a big impact. One day, if you get involved in wildlife conservation, you'll be up close and personal with the animals, because you could be involved in so many ways. You could be a game ranger, you could be a wildlife veterinarian, and you can also stay in touch with me at Animal Survival. And when there's wildlife projects, I can send you information. So there's loads and loads of ways to get involved.
How can kids find you on social media?
They can find us by searching for Animal Survival International on Facebook, on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and TikTok.
Thank you, Debbie. Thanks for watching, and see you next time on Nature's Guardians.
Thank you so much, Micah, for having me. It was great to chat to you.